The year was 1865. Smoke hung low in the valley like a vulture circling its prey. The hills around McCrae Ranch glowed orange, flames licking the black sky as the main barn groaned and collapsed inward. Somewhere beyond the burning wreckage, a horse screamed, a terrible, human-like shriek that tore through the chaos and made Elijah McRae's blood run cold. He stood barefoot in the dust, shirt clinging to his back with sweat and ash, a rifle gripped too tight in trembling hands. His boots were lost in the sprint from the bunkhouse, where he'd been dreaming of water and sky, and maybe a life that didn't smell like cattle. That dream died the moment the first torch struck the roof. "Elijah," his father's voice cracked like the butt of a whip. "Get your damn brother." Will, 16 and hot-headed, probably still trying to get his pistol loaded right. Elijah dashed into the house, past the shattered window, ducking smoke and heat. There was no time for fear. The floorboards screamed under his weight as he found Will coughing, hunched behind the upturned table, blood on his temple and the Colt limp in his grip. "Elijah," Will rasped, eyes glassy. "They're still out there." "Come on," Elijah muttered, yanking his brother's arm over his shoulder. Together, they stumbled back toward the open door, but the night answered with a shrill whistle, then a roar. A torch flew through the window and shattered on the wall, flames dancing. Elijah dragged him out just before the roof caved in. They fell to the dirt together. Elijah turned to shield Will's body with his own, but it was already too late. Blood soaked into the ground. A bullet had torn through Will's side sometime during the escape. His little brother blinked slowly, the color draining from his face as if the fire behind them was sucking out his soul. "No, no, no," Elijah whispered, pressing his hands to the wound. "We'll try to speak." Then he was still. The gunfire tapered off. Elijah looked up just in time to see a figure on horseback cresting the hill above them. For a second, the firelight caught her face and the world slowed. She wasn't masked like the others. No war paint, no rifle. Just obsidian eyes, long dark braids, and something aching behind her stare. She sat silent, watching him with a quiet he didn't understand, as if his pain reached her across the flames. Then she turned and vanished into the trees. By dawn, what remained of the McCrae Ranch was black timber and silence. The few hands who survived stood hollow-eyed beside the burnt fence posts, waiting for orders that didn't come. Elijah buried Will behind the old chicken coop where the ground was still soft. His father, John McCrae, said nothing. He just stood near the smoking chimney with a busted shoulder and hate carving lines deeper into his face. "We'll hunt them down," John muttered later that night, his voice thick as tar. "Every last one." Elijah said nothing. His chest burned, but not with fury, something colder, emptier. The girl on the hill kept returning to him, her eyes vivid even through the veil of smoke. She hadn't fired a shot. She hadn't screamed or laughed like the others. She had simply watched. Over the next weeks, revenge became routine. The McCraes rode out at dawn and returned bloodied by dusk. Some days they found nothing but empty trails. Others, they found tracks, ash, footprints vanishing into the high grass. Once, they came upon a half-dismantled camp, bowls still warm, fire smoldering, but no souls in sight. Elijah kept his distance during the violence. His shots were always off. When his father ordered them to torch a lodge nestled near the river bend, Elijah pretended not to hear the wailing inside. When asked later, he said it must have been the wind. One afternoon, while scouting alone along the creek, Elijah dismounted to water his horse and refill his canteen. The trees here were old, gnarled things with trunks as wide as doors. The sound of water soothed the ever-present pounding in his ears. Then a rustle behind him, bare feet on stone. He spun around, rifle raised. She stood across the stream, no more than 15 feet away. No war paint, just a satchel slung over one shoulder, wild herbs spilling from the seams. "You," he breathed. The girl didn't flinch. "You buried your brother by the coop." Her voice was low, rough like the river's edge. She didn't smile. She didn't seem afraid. "What do you want?" he asked, not lowering the rifle. "Nothing." She tilted her head slightly. You were there when my uncle died. At the camp. He wasn't a warrior. He carved bulls. Elijah blinked. You raided us first. Your men poisoned a deer trail 3 months ago. 2 children died. Her tone wasn't angry, just exhausted. Elijah didn't answer. His hands trembled, the barrel of his rifle swaying. Finally, slowly, he lowered it. What's your name? He asked. Ayoka. There was a pause where the air between them thickened. A bird trilled overhead, oblivious to war or names. Elijah, he said at last. Her eyes flicked to the rifle. You missed on purpose. He didn't answer. She turned without another word and disappeared into the forest, her dark braids swinging like a pendulum behind her. Elijah didn't tell his father. He returned to that creek 2 days later. She was already waiting. Their second meeting was no easier. They argued. She accused. He denied. But each accusation cracked something brittle inside him. Each question she asked about why settlers cut through old burial mounds, why his father never traded with her people like other ranchers did, left him quiet, thinking. She returned again. Then again. Their meetings became ritual. No fire, no promises. Just words. She showed him which herbs numbed pain, how to spot the trees that bled sap like honey. He taught her how to shoot with both eyes open. Slowly, suspicion softened. Words grew longer. Laughter came, awkward then real. They never spoke of their families. One evening, thunder cracked in the hills and the sky split open. Rain came down in sheets. They took shelter beneath a slanted overhang of stone, their shoulders pressed together for warmth. Neither moved away. Why do you keep coming? She asked. I don't know, he said. You don't feel like an enemy. She looked at him then, not with challenge, but with something fragile. You don't feel like a settler, she whispered. The kiss wasn't planned. It wasn't soft. It came desperate, urgent, in the way fire finds dry grass. His hands found her cheek, hers his collarbone. The rain masked their breath, the rocks echoing their heartbeats. Then she pulled back. This is dangerous, she said. If we're caught, I don't care. You should. He leaned in, rested his forehead against hers. I breathe easier when I'm near you. That ain't something I can ignore. She trembled, but didn't step away. Time passed. The world around them darkened. The McCraes torched another camp. This time, Elijah rode behind the others, heart clenching as they hooped and threw fire. He imagined Ayoka's face in every window. He tried to scream for them to stop, but the sound caught in his throat. When he returned to the creek, she was there, waiting, silent. I know, he said before she spoke. She slapped him. He didn't fight it. They didn't listen. You let it happen. He sank to the ground, filthy and hollow. I wanted to warn you. I swear. She paced like a caged animal, wind tangling her braids. My cousin died. His sister can't speak anymore. I'm sorry. Sorry won't bring him back. Her voice cracked, and something inside him shattered. I want this to stop, he whispered. I don't want to hate you. I never did. She turned away, breathing hard. When she spoke again, it was soft. There's a place, a grove deep in the forest. No blood's ever been spilled there. Not in 100 years. We used to go there as children. Show me. She hesitated. You'll swear never to harm it? I swear. The walk took hours, twisting through mossy trees and narrow deer paths, the world fading to shadow and green. When they arrived, the grove was quiet, untouched, a hush upon it. Flowers bloomed in soft yellows and blues. Stones formed a natural ring like guardians. This is peace, she said, stepping into the center. It's the only place that feels like it still belongs to both worlds. Elijah followed, knelt beside her. I don't want to keep sneaking around, he said. I want to fight for something worth saving. You. Us. Her eyes met his. You'd give up your family for this? I already have. She didn't answer, but her hand found his. They lay together that night beneath the canopy, hearts pounding louder than the wind. No promises, no future spoken aloud, but everything said in the space between breaths. Morning came soft and golden. He brushed hair from her brow and whispered her name. She smiled just once, then a distant shout. Hooves. The sound of men. They froze. She grabbed her satchel. Go. Now. We can outrun them. No, she shoved him toward the trees. If they catch you here, they'll kill you. You're the traitor now. And what about you? She hesitated. I'm nobody. I'll vanish like smoke. Their lips met one last time, fierce, wordless, and full of every feeling they didn't dare say. Then she was gone. Elijah ran, branches whipping his face, each step carrying her scent and the sound of her voice echoing in his blood. He didn't look back. Snow hadn't yet touched the valley, but the mornings carried a cold edge sharp enough to slice breath in two. The leaves had turned brittle on the branches, yellow and flame red, and Elijah McCrae rode under them as if they were falling judgment from the sky. Each hoofbeat of his horse seemed louder than the last, echoing through the thinning trees. Every sound was a question. Had someone seen him? Had they followed? He hadn't seen Ayoka in 3 days. Not since the grove, not since the voices. And yet every night he returned to their meeting place like a man chasing a prayer. She was always gone before he arrived, if she came at all. He couldn't blame her. Everything had changed. He hadn't spoken to his father more than a few words since that day. John McCrae looked at him with eyes like cracked ice, silent, unreadable. A week ago he would have yelled. Now he just watched and waited, as if expecting his son to slip. The townsfolk buzzed like hornets. 2 nights prior, a child from the nearby Mormon outpost had vanished. No sign, no trace, just an empty bed and footprints leading toward the highlands. The boy's name was Thomas, 9 years old, blonde curls and a sweet singing voice that made even the roughest of the ranch hands go still when he sang during Sunday gatherings. And now he was gone. It didn't take long for whispers to grow teeth. They blamed the Cheyenne. They always did. At the trading post, voices swelled like thunder. Elijah watched from the edge of the crowd as his father stood with the other ranchers, eyes dark, fists clenched. A name was shouted, then another. The town marshal tried to calm them, but it was too late. Rage was already galloping. By nightfall, a posse had formed, his father at the front, holding a rifle and a bottle of cheap whiskey. They think we're weak, John growled, his voice thick. We'll remind them. Elijah stood near the stables, his jaw clenched so tight it ached. He couldn't let this happen. Not again. He found his father before the men rode out and grabbed the reins of his horse. It wasn't them, he said, low and steady. John didn't blink. You see it with your own eyes? I know the girl. The girl? John's voice turned to venom. You mean the one you've been sneaking off to see? You think I don't know, boy? The words hit harder than a slap. Elijah let go of the reins. John leaned close. That girl's poison. She's the root of it all. You're too blind to see it. She's not like them, Elijah said, his voice cracking. She saved me. John spat into the dirt. Then may God help you. Because I won't. The posse rode out before dawn, a smear of fury across the valley. Elijah didn't follow. He rode the opposite direction. He found her near the base of the old limestone cliffs, her hair wind-blown, her shoulders hunched. She looked smaller now, like the weight of everything had folded her in half. They think you took the boy, he said. She turned slowly. We didn't. We wouldn't. I know. They'll come for us. They already have. Her eyes met his, and he saw the fear there, not for herself, but for those she loved. We have to stop this, he said. Her laugh was bitter and short. You still think you can stop a storm? I don't know what else to do. They stood there in silence, wind moaning through the rocks. There's talk of moving the whole camp, she said at last. My father wants to go north. Hide until winter passes. You'll freeze up there. Better that than be hunted like animals. Elijah reached for her hand. Come with me. She pulled away. You don't understand. I can't leave them. And I can't let them kill you. She stared at him, lips parted, breath shaky. We are pieces of different worlds. You were born into iron. I was born into smoke. Love doesn't erase that. He stepped closer, then let it defy it. She didn't answer with words. She kissed him, not soft this time, not with questions, but with everything she'd buried in her bones. He held her like she might vanish, and for the first time in days, he felt something like peace. But it didn't last. A scout found the Cheyenne camp that same evening. Elijah heard the bells ringing through the town center as he returned. They meant blood. They meant war. He went to the grove. She was there. "We're out of time," she said. "They won't listen to me. My father said, if your people come again, they will not run. They will stand. And mine are coming at sunrise." They sat together in silence. "What do we do?" he asked. She closed her eyes. "We pray that something breaks before everything else does." He pulled her into his arms. "Run away with me." Her breath caught. "I want to. God, I want to. But if we go, who's left to stop it from happening again? You really think we can stop it?" "I think if we don't try, we're no better than the ones with blood on their hands." He held her tighter. "Then we stay. Together." When the first shots rang out, the sun was just beginning to crest the ridgeline. Elijah ran toward the sound, rifle slung over his shoulder, boots pounding the frost-covered grass. Smoke rose in pillars. Cries echoed. A woman screamed. Dogs barked wildly, the chaos of war unraveling into madness. The McCrae posse had struck fast, riding hard into the camp, guns blazing, torches flying. But the Cheyenne were ready. Warriors pushed back with bow and musket. Fire flashed from both sides. Elijah ducked beneath a fallen log, reloading, heart pounding so loud he could barely hear. Ahead, a young man charged forward with a tomahawk. Elijah recognized him, Ayoka's cousin. Barely 18. A bullet caught him in the chest. He fell backward, eyes wide in disbelief, limbs jerking. Elijah crawled forward, dragging the body out of the line of fire. The boy gurgled something, then went still. A scream pierced the air. "Ayoka!" Elijah spun. She was surrounded, cornered by 3 settlers, one with a bayonet, another with a branding iron. Her knife lay on the ground, useless. He didn't think. He charged. His rifle cracked. One man dropped. The other turned, but too late. Elijah tackled him, fists flying, rage boiling. The iron clanged to the ground. Blood smeared across his knuckles. The last man fled. Ayoka stared at him breathless. "You came." "Always." Then a shout. "Elijah!" He turned to see his father. Rifle raised, eyes wide, looking not at him but at her. "Get away from her." John roared. "She saved me." Elijah shouted. "I said get away. You're one of them now, aren't you?" John took aim. Ayoka stepped forward. "He's not the enemy." But John didn't hear. Or he didn't care. A bullet tore through the air. Ayoka flinched, then gasped. Blood bloomed at her shoulder. Elijah screamed. He lunged for his father, knocking the rifle aside. They tumbled to the ground, fists and curses flying. Years of silence, anger, and confusion came out in each blow. Elijah struck him once, then twice. "I loved her," he shouted. "I love her." John didn't fight back. He just stared, shocked, maybe broken. By the time Elijah looked up, Ayoka was gone. He found her near the grove, her hand pressed to the wound, blood seeping through her fingers. She was pale, shaking, but alive. "Hold still," he whispered, tearing fabric from his shirt. "You'll be hunted for this," she murmured. "So will you." They sat beneath the trees, blood mixing with earth. The world roared behind them, but here it was quiet. She smiled faintly. "We could run now." He nodded. "We could." But they didn't move. As the sun dipped low again, and the smoke thinned across the hills, Elijah pulled her close. "Whatever happens next," he said, "we face it together." She nodded. Above them, the leaves rustled like whispered promises, and in that moment they weren't Cheyenne or settler, not hunted or hunter, just 2 hearts still beating, still burning, in a world trying to put them out. They didn't know what would come next, but they knew the storm hadn't broken them yet, and that for now was enough. The mountains rose like broken teeth beyond the pine ridges, their jagged edges catching the light of dawn like blades. Snow crowned the highest peaks, even in early autumn, warning of the long, brutal winter that would soon swallow the valley whole. Elijah McCrae had never seen mountains up close before. He hadn't known they could be so quiet, or that the silence could feel heavier than thunder. He crouched beside a trickling stream, scooping cold water into his mouth, tasting pine and copper. Behind him, Ayoka sat against a tree, her wounded shoulder wrapped in makeshift cloth torn from his coat. She hadn't said much since the shootout, only soft breaths, small nods, occasional winces. The pain was real, but it was the silence between them that troubled him more. They had left everything behind. No horses, no food, only what they could carry and a rough idea of where the trails might lead. The settlers would assume Elijah had been killed or turned traitor. The Cheyenne might think Ayoka had been captured or worse. Neither side would be eager to find them or forgive them. The wound festered. By the third day, she could no longer walk unaided. Elijah built a sled from branches and deer hide and pulled her along narrow game trails, each mile harder than the last. He whispered encouragements she could barely hear. At night, he lay awake beside the fire, staring into the orange glow, watching shadows flicker across her face. She looked smaller now. Not fragile, she was never fragile, but worn, like something carved beautiful and then weathered by too much wind. "I'm sorry," he whispered one night, not sure if she was awake. Her eyes blinked slowly open. "For what?" "For dragging you into this. For not stopping it sooner." She smiled faintly, dry-lipped. "You didn't drag me. I stepped toward you." They didn't speak again until dawn. The forest thinned as the days wore on. The air turned sharper. They passed signs of old camps, abandoned rings of stone, shattered arrow shafts, bones picked clean by wolves. A bear crossed their path once, a massive black shape that paused just long enough to look Elijah in the eye before lumbering into the trees. By the time they reached the grove, Ayoka was barely conscious. He carried her the last 100 yards in his arms, heart pounding with each step. The sacred place hadn't changed. The stones still ringed the clearing like silent sentries. The air still held that strange, peaceful hush that made even the birds quiet. He laid her down beside the largest stone and washed her brow with cool water from a spring. She stirred, blinking. "We made it," he said. She tried to smile. "You always said this place felt like it belonged to us." He kissed her forehead. "It still does." Days passed. He hunted what he could: squirrels, grouse, once a lean young buck. He tanned the hide and used the rest for stew. She began to eat again. Her voice returned, raspier than before, but steady. "I had a dream," she told him one night, their hands intertwined beneath a blanket of pine needles. "We lived near a lake. With ducks. You built a house out of logs, but it leaned to the side." He laughed softly. "Sounds about right. I'm better with a rifle than a hammer." "I taught children to make paint from berries," she continued, "and we had a son. He had your eyes." He watched her face, the soft way it lit beneath the firelight. "What would we call him?" he asked. She smiled. "Talon." So he remembers the hawk. Winter crept in sooner than expected. Snow came in thin flurries at first, then steady sheets that blanketed the forest floor. The cold made them move less, speak less, conserve every ounce of heat and energy. One morning, while checking the snare line, Elijah found fresh boot prints in the snow. Not his, not hers. He returned to the grove, silent, slow. "They found us," he said, and she didn't need to ask who. By nightfall, firelight flickered in the distance, just over the ridge near the old pine stand. He counted 3 figures, maybe 4, moving slow, cautious. Ayoka sat up, eyes sharp. "We can't run anymore," she said. "I'm not letting them take you. If we flee now, they'll chase us until spring. If we face them, maybe it ends here." He hated it, but he knew she was right. They didn't sleep that night. They packed their few belongings, sharpened what blades they had, buried the extra food under snow. At first light, they stood together near the center of the grove, facing the approaching figures. The first to arrive was her father, tough as old oak, with silver braided through his black hair and eyes like iron nails. Behind him, a younger warrior, Ayoka's cousin, the one they thought had died in the raid, stood tall with a spear in hand. Elijah could barely breathe. Then, from the other side of the clearing, came the crunch of boots on snow. John McCrae emerged, rifle in hand. He looked thinner, older. His breath misted the air as he locked eyes with his son. A long silence followed. No one moved. Ayoka stepped forward, hand raised. "We're not here to fight." Her father said nothing. John's lip curled. "He was my son." "He still is," she answered. John looked at Elijah, and for a flicker of a moment, the anger in his face faltered. "I saw you with her. Back then, at the camp." His voice trembled. "And I let it happen. Thought maybe you'd come back. Thought it was just grief clouding your mind." Elijah stepped forward, careful. "I did come back, but not for you. Not for anyone. I came back for her." "You turned your back on your blood." "No, I followed where it led." John shook his head. "You'll hang if you return." "I'm not going back." The Cheyenne warrior stepped closer. "Neither is she." The wind picked up, howling low across the clearing. The trees creaked. Then a gunshot. It wasn't from John, not from the warrior. It came from the ridge behind. A scream followed. The younger Cheyenne dropped to the ground, blood soaking his tunic. Chaos erupted. Elijah grabbed Ayoka, diving for cover behind the stones. Another shot cracked. Her father returned fire. John spun, yelling something unintelligible. A third figure, unknown, cloaked in snow-white furs, descended the ridge, rifle smoking. A settler? A bounty hunter? No one knew. But the madness he brought shattered the truce that never had a chance. Elijah rose, aiming. The figure turned toward him. He fired. The man dropped. Then silence again. Shivering, ragged silence. The clearing was a ruin. Blood on the snow. A cousin dead. A stranger bleeding into the dirt. Ayoka clutched her side, gasping. Not again. Elijah reached her, catching her before she fell. "No," he whispered, holding her close. "Not like this." She smiled through the pain. "I'm still here." Behind them, her father knelt by the fallen warrior. John stood near the stranger's corpse, breathing hard. Elijah looked at both men. "It ends here. No more death. Not in this place." Neither answered for a long while. Then, slowly, Ayoka's father stood and turned to John. "We let them go. We speak no more of them." John's jaw clenched, then relaxed. He nodded once. "They're gone." And that was it. No ceremony. No peace treaty. Just the cold and the wind and two old men who had seen too much. That night, Elijah built a sled for the wounded again. They left the grove without looking back. Months passed. Spring came slowly, melting the world one drop at a time. Somewhere beyond the western ridge, in a hidden glen beside a glassy lake, Elijah and Ayoka built a home. Logs leaned a little to the left. The roof needed patching every time it rained, but it stood, and inside it, love breathed where vengeance had failed. Their son was born the following year. He had his mother's eyes. At night, by the fire, Elijah would tell him stories of the mountains, of groves, of old names whispered on the wind. And sometimes when the fire burned low and the boy had drifted to sleep, Elijah would sit beside Ayoka, in silence, her hand in his, and wonder at the way the world had changed around them. The war never found them again, but the memory of it did. They carried it in their scars, in the names they never spoke, in the way they watched the tree lean every time a bird flew too fast. Still, love remained, defiant, unyielding, because some things are stronger than blood, stronger than history, stronger than hate. Some things, like breathing, can't be forbidden, and their love, born of fire and silence, never once asked for permission. It just lived. The fire crackled low in the hearth, casting long shadows across the rough-hewn walls of the cabin. Outside, the wind howled down from the mountains, sharp as a knife's edge, rattling the shutters like ghostly fingers clawing for entry. Elijah McCrae sat near the window, eyes fixed on the darkness beyond the glass, one hand resting on the rifle in his lap, the other gently rocking the cradle beside him. The boy inside stirred, not from hunger or fear, but from instinct. He always woke when the wind shifted, like he knew it carried more than just cold air. Elijah leaned down and whispered softly, brushing dark hair from the boy's forehead. "Easy now, Talone. You're safe." But the truth was far from comforting. 3 nights ago, Elijah had seen smoke rising to the east. Not the gentle kind from a cook fire, but the thick, angry plumes of something burned in haste with purpose. The kind that trailed riders, strangers, trouble. He hadn't said anything to Ayoka yet, not because he meant to keep it from her, but because he wasn't ready to see that look in her eyes again. That old pain, that fear she buried so deep he could feel it more than she ever let it show. She came in from the cold just as he set the kettle on the iron rack. Snow clung to the hem of her buckskin coat, and her cheeks were flushed from the wind. She moved quietly, carefully, still favoring the side where the bullet had scarred her a year past, but her eyes, sharp as ever, locked onto him the moment she crossed the threshold. "You saw it," she said. He didn't pretend. "Yes. South Ridge?" He nodded. She closed her eyes and drew a breath that rattled somewhere deep in her chest. "We can leave," he said. "Still time to make the North Pass before the snow settles in." Ayoka looked around the room, at the cradle, the half-carved shelves, the pile of herbs drying by the window, at the life they'd built out of ruin. "No," she said softly but firm. "We stay." He didn't argue. There was steel in her voice that would outlast any storm. They prepared in silence. Extra food packed into oilskin bundles. Traps checked and reset. The axe sharpened. The sled made ready should the boy need to be moved fast. And always, the rifle sat between them like a third presence, silent, waiting, final. By the second night, the smoke was closer. By dawn of the third, they heard the distant sound of hooves. Not many. 2, maybe 3. Moving slow. Cautious. Elias set Talon into a hollow under the floorboards, something he had carved months ago in secret, not knowing why, just that he might need it one day. Ayoka kissed the boy's brow, humming a lullaby her mother had once sung to her beside fire and drum. Then they waited. The first knock came just after midday. Not a pounding demand, but something more calculated. A tap, like someone saying, "We know you're in there." Elijah moved to the door, rifle at the ready. Ayoka crouched behind the table with her bow drawn and silent fury in her gaze. "Who's there?" Elijah called. No answer. He opened the door a crack. A man stood just beyond the porch, wrapped in a duster worn by dust and time. His face was half covered in a scarf, but his eyes gleamed, a colorless gray that gave no warmth. "Name's Caleb Dunn," the man said. "Heard tale of a squaw who ran with a settler and had herself a half-breed. Just wondering if that tale ends here." Elijah raised the rifle. "That tale ends with you walking away." Caleb chuckled, low and mean. "Now see, that'd be fine if it weren't for the bounty." "What bounty?" The man stepped back, nodded to the pine trees. A second rider emerged, lean, hollow-eyed, carrying a repeating carbine. A third figure, hooded, quiet, hovered behind them, watching. "Your old man's got long memory," Caleb said. "Put silver on your head and double for the squaw. Reckons you've got something that don't belong to either side." Elijah's grip tightened. "And you came to collect?" Caleb shrugged. "Silver's silver. You'll get none of it here." "No," Caleb said, "but I might take it anyway." The first shot came from the trees. It missed but barely, but splintered near Elijah's head. He slammed the door shut and dove back as another shot punched through the wall. Talon whimpered beneath the floorboards. "We're surrounded," Ayoka said, already stringing her bow. "Front and flank," Elijah muttered, "but not the back. Not yet." They moved like breath and heartbeat, no panic, just motion. Elijah pulled the dresser to block the window. Ayoka set fire to a small pot of pitch, its smoke pungent and thick. When the next shot came, she loosed an arrow through the front gap. A cry rang out, then cursing. "They'll rush next," Elijah said. "They think we're cornered," she replied. They waited until the pounding of boots began, until the porch groaned under the weight of more than one body. Then Elijah kicked the back door open and ran. The snow gave him away, but speed favored him. 2 steps, then 3. He dropped to one knee and fired once, twice. The man with the carbine went down, red blooming on his chest. The hooded figure screamed something and turned, but too late, Ayoka's arrow buried deep into his thigh. Caleb howled, Not from pain but rage. He leapt from the porch, blade in hand, and caught Elijah with the hilt across the temple. Stars burst behind his eyes. The rifle slipped. Caleb pressed the blade to Elijah's throat. "You really think you could hide?" he snarled. "Boy, like you ain't meant for mountains. You're dirt, mud. You'll die for a woman who ain't even yours." Then Ayoka's voice, clear, calm, filled with venom. "She's mine." Caleb turned. The arrow struck him dead center in the chest. He staggered, looked down at the feathered shaft as though it had betrayed him, then crumpled forward onto the snow. Elijah rolled out from under the weight, gasping. The forest was still again. The third man was gone, fled or dying, it didn't matter. They stood in the snow, panting, blood mixed with the melting frost, turning the white world red around their boots. Back in the cabin, Talon cried. Ayoka rushed inside, lifted him from the floorboards, kissed his forehead, held him close. Elijah followed, bleeding from the scalp, arms aching but smiling. They said nothing for a long while. Later, they burned the bodies. Not out of hate, out of finality. That night, they sat beside the fire, Talon sleeping between them, the air filled with pine smoke and old fears made silent by the crackling flame. "You think your father will send more?" Ayoka asked. "No," Elijah said. "That was his last try. He sent killers instead of messengers. That means he's done speaking." She nodded, not with peace, but with understanding. "Then we stay," she said. He looked at her, saw the lines in her face, the quiet strength, the fierce loyalty. "We build higher walls," he said. "Train the boy to shoot straight." She smiled. "Teach him to run faster than you." They laughed softly. Outside, the wind carried the scent of cedar. The stars gleamed above the dark pines. Life was no easier now than before, but it was real. It was theirs. And that was enough. Because some loves weren't written in law or blood, but in the fire of survival, in shared pain, and in the silence that followed a storm. They had carved something from the wilderness that no bounty could buy, no father could erase, no bullet could undo. In the end, it wasn't the world that granted them peace. It was the choice to fight for it, to build it, to protect it, and as long as they breathed, they would never stop.